It was a warm, sunny afternoon when Lila, a young woman in the late stages of her pregnancy, decided to take a short walk to the corner store. She loved these little moments when she could feel the world around her, listen to the birds, and enjoy the gentle breeze. Her belly was heavy now, and walking slowly was almost a necessity, but it gave her time to think, to plan, and to breathe in the quiet peace of the day. Lila had always been careful in her neighborhood, friendly with most people but cautious around strangers. She had grown up here, and even though the streets were familiar, there was always the chance of running into someone who didn't belong. As she turned the corner, balancing her steps carefully on the uneven sidewalk, she noticed the rumble of a motorcycle approaching. At first, she didn't think much of it. Motorcycles were common around her part of the city. The sound grew louder, and she caught a glimpse of the rider, a man wearing dark leather, a helmet that hid most of his face, and an air of arrogance that made him seem larger than life. He slowed down as he approached her, but not in a polite or cautious way. Instead, he lingered, watching her as if she were an object rather than a person. "Hey there," he said, his voice rough and sharp. Lila felt a chill run down her spine. She tried to smile politely, hoping he would just pass by, but he didn't. He parked his bike across the street, leaning it casually against a lamppost, and began circling her slowly, his eyes fixed on her. Lila felt a tightening in her chest. She had faced rude comments before, but something about the way he looked at her made her uneasy. It wasn't just disrespect, it was a feeling of danger, subtle but undeniable. Lila tried to keep calm. She adjusted the strap of her bag over her shoulder, took a deep breath, and continued walking. "I don't want any trouble," she muttered to herself, hoping he would just leave. But the man wasn't finished. He stepped closer, blocking part of the sidewalk, his presence making it hard for her to pass without brushing against him. "Where are you going all alone, pretty lady?" he asked, smirking beneath his helmet. Lila's hands shook slightly. She wanted to respond politely to diffuse the situation, but words felt useless in the face of someone so bold. She quickened her pace, hoping to get past him, but he matched her steps, keeping just enough distance to stay intimidating. People were walking by, some glancing at the scene, others pretending not to notice. Lila felt her heart race. She was aware of her condition. Any sudden movement could be risky for her and her baby. But the instinct to protect herself kicked in stronger than ever. She reminded herself to stay calm, to keep her voice steady if she needed to speak. Then, just as her fear was peaking, she noticed a tall figure walking down the opposite side of the street. At first, she didn't recognize him. He seemed confident, moving with purpose, his eyes scanning the surroundings like he was noticing everything. There was something familiar about his posture, the calm authority he carried. Lila's gaze met his for a brief moment, and she felt a flicker of hope. He didn't rush toward her, didn't call out, but his presence was enough to make her feel that maybe she wasn't completely alone. The biker, oblivious to the man across the street, continued his harassment. He stepped closer, his tone mocking now. "What's wrong? Scared of a little fun?" he sneered. Lila's hand instinctively went to her belly. She felt the baby move, and that small life inside her reminded her she had to stay strong. She squared her shoulders, trying to look confident even though her heart was pounding. The man across the street, John, as she would later know him, kept walking steadily, never breaking his calm. His eyes didn't leave the biker, and Lila noticed a shift in the way the biker behaved. There was a tension now, a subtle awareness that someone was watching. The biker laughed it off at first, shrugging, but he kept glancing around nervously. Lila realized that she might have help, even if silently, even if no one had spoken a word yet. The wind carried the faint sound of the biker's bike engine as he revved it lightly, a show of bravado. Lila's steps quickened. She focused on her breathing, telling herself she could make it past him. She could reach the store, she could stay safe. Every instinct screamed to run, but she knew running could provoke him further. She kept moving steadily, her eyes scanning the street for any other signs of help or danger. Then came a moment of silence. The biker stopped in his tracks mid-step, as if feeling the weight of unseen eyes on him. Lila sensed the shift immediately. The fear she had carried for the last few minutes didn't vanish, but it lessened slightly. Someone was paying attention, someone who wasn't going to let this go unnoticed. Her chest still heaved with adrenaline, but there was a glimmer of reassurance in the way the stranger looked at the biker. He didn't rush in, didn't yell. He simply stood there watching, commanding in a way that made the biker pause. Lila kept walking, her pace steady, and the biker finally muttered something under his breath and stepped back. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She only focused on moving forward, feeling her strength return with every careful step. Her eyes flicked toward the man watching across the street. He nodded slightly, a silent gesture of acknowledgement and protection. Lila felt a mix of relief and gratitude. She didn't know his name, didn't know why he had chosen to stay, but his presence was enough to give her courage. As she reached the crosswalk, the biker finally turned and mounted his bike, revving the engine before speeding away. Lila stopped for a moment, her hands on her knees, breathing heavily but safely. The tension slowly drained from her body, replaced by a mix of shock, relief, and awe. She looked toward the man across the street again, who now began walking in her direction. He introduced himself simply, politely, with no hint of showmanship. "Are you okay?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. Lila nodded, still catching her breath, and managed a small smile. "Thank you," she said softly, realizing how lucky she was to have someone intervene even from a distance. He didn't take any credit, didn't make it about himself. He simply made sure she was safe, and then he let her continue her way. For Lila, that afternoon became unforgettable. It wasn't just about the danger she faced. It was about the unexpected kindness and protection of a stranger. The world often felt indifferent, but in that moment she realized there were people willing to stand up, even quietly, to protect others. As she finally reached the store, feeling her legs ache and her belly heavy, she carried with her a sense of reassurance that the day, despite its fear, had also shown the strength of human decency. She thought about the biker, the man who had tried to intimidate her, and realized that fear often stemmed from power without accountability. But she also thought about the quiet observer, the man who had chosen to act with courage, and understood that true power could be shown through restraint, calmness, and the willingness to protect. That day the streets were ordinary, yet extraordinary things had happened: fear, courage, and the subtle reminder that kindness sometimes comes when it is needed most. As Lila left the store, carrying her groceries slowly back home, she felt lighter than before. The fear was still there, lingering in the back of her mind, but it had been tempered with hope. She remembered the man's eyes, steady and kind, and how his presence had changed everything. The city felt different now, not just a place of risks, but a place where unseen heroes walked among ordinary people, ready to step in when it mattered most. By the time she reached her front door, Lila paused for a moment, resting her hand on her belly. She whispered a quiet thanks to herself, to her child, and to the stranger who had shown her that even in moments of fear, courage and humanity could prevail. And as she stepped inside, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor, she felt a deep, unshakable sense of gratitude for the unexpected encounter that had turned a frightening walk into a story of hope and protection. After the biker had sped away, Lila felt a wave of relief wash over her. She thought the danger had passed, but deep down she knew that moments like these rarely ended so neatly. Her heartbeat was slowly returning to normal, but every sound of the street, the screech of tires, the chatter of passers-by, the distant honking, kept her alert. She hugged her growing belly instinctively, feeling the baby's soft movements as if it, too, was aware of the lingering tension. She had only just started walking toward her apartment again when she noticed something unsettling. A shadow fell across the sidewalk, and the rumble of a motorcycle reached her ears once more. The same biker had circled back. His approach was deliberate this time, slow and menacing. Lila froze for a moment, trying to think quickly. She didn't want to panic, but every instinct screamed that he wasn't done. She took a careful step backward, hoping to create space, but the man's bike blocked part of the sidewalk again. "Where do you think you're going?" he called, his voice sharp and mocking. "You think you can just walk away?" Lila swallowed hard, holding herself steady. She could feel her pulse in her temples. Her mind raced, trying to think of what to do next. Calling for help was an option, but she wasn't sure anyone would come quickly enough. Her feet felt rooted to the ground, her arms tense, and she tried to remember the calm she had felt when the stranger had watched from across the street earlier. She glanced up instinctively and saw him again, John still observing quietly from a few yards away. His presence made her chest tighten with a mixture of hope and anxiety. He hadn't intervened yet, but the way he stood, tall, calm, unshakable, was enough to make her feel that someone was looking out for her. Even so, the biker didn't seem to notice him. He was focused entirely on Lila, his arrogance blinding him to the fact that he was being watched. The biker stepped off his bike now, making his movements deliberate as though he wanted to intimidate her further. "You're too pretty to be walking alone," he sneered, circling her slowly. Lila's heart raced faster. She took a careful step back, making sure she didn't trip on the uneven pavement. Her mind screamed at her to stay calm, to keep breathing, to not give him any reason to escalate, but she felt trapped, aware that her pregnancy made her physically vulnerable. She tried to speak in a firm, steady voice. "Please, just leave me alone," she said. Her words were soft, but there was a note of authority she hoped he would respect. The biker laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that made her stomach twist. "Leave you alone? You think you can tell me what to do?" he said, his tone venomous. He leaned closer, just enough to make her flinch, and Lila could feel a sense of danger pressing down on her. It was in that moment she realized the true weight of the situation. This wasn't just rude behavior. It was harassment, and it could escalate if she didn't find a way out. Every passerby seemed to move around them, as if the scene didn't concern them. Lila felt a wave of isolation, but then her eyes flicked toward John again. He hadn't moved yet, but the focus in his gaze was undeniable. It was as if he was measuring every possibility, every risk, and planning the right moment to act. The biker noticed him finally, glancing over his shoulder with a smirk. "Who's that?" "Your friend?" he sneered, trying to appear fearless. Lila held her breath. She knew that whoever this stranger was, he could make a difference, but there was no guarantee the biker would back down. The tension in the air was almost physical, the kind that makes the heart pound and the palms sweat. John took a step forward, his presence suddenly more pronounced. He didn't shout, didn't make any sudden movements, but there was a commanding energy about him that seemed to ripple through the space between them. The biker faltered slightly, his smirk fading as he registered the authority in John's stance. Lila could see the biker's unease grow, though he tried to mask it with a false laugh. She felt a small spark of hope. Still, the biker wasn't done. He took another step closer, lowering his voice. "I don't like being ignored," he said, his tone threatening. Lila could feel her knees weaken slightly. She knew she needed to stay composed for herself and for her baby. She clenched her fists lightly, focusing on each step she could take to put distance between them. But the sidewalk was narrow and escape felt complicated. John finally intervened, moving closer with deliberate calm. "That's enough," he said firmly, his voice steady and low. There was no aggression in it, but there was authority, an unspoken warning that the situation had shifted. The biker froze, momentarily thrown off. He hadn't expected anyone to confront him, especially someone who didn't look like they were afraid. The street seemed to quiet around them, the bystanders suddenly noticing the tension. Lila felt a wave of relief at the sight of John stepping in, though she stayed alert. She knew the situation wasn't over until she was safely past it. The biker tried to regain his composure, but it was clear he was no longer in control. "Who do you think you are?" he demanded, his tone defensive now. John didn't answer with words at first. He simply stood tall, watching, making it clear that any further harassment would not be tolerated. The biker, frustrated, revved his motorcycle again, attempting to assert dominance. Lila flinched at the sound, her hands trembling slightly. She wanted to speak, to say something that might calm him down, but fear and adrenaline made words difficult. John noticed her hesitation and offered a reassuring glance, a silent message to stay calm, to trust that she wasn't alone. For a moment, time seemed suspended. The biker circled his bike slowly, unsure how to act with the unseen authority now watching him. Lila felt her heartbeat gradually slowing, the terror giving way to cautious hope. She realized that someone who cared about fairness and safety had stepped in, someone willing to take responsibility for the situation. It was a powerful feeling, one she hadn't expected when she had left her home that afternoon. Then, as if sensing he had lost, the biker finally muttered under his breath and turned toward his bike. He mounted it, revving the engine one last time, and sped off, leaving a cloud of dust behind. Lila exhaled deeply, a mixture of relief and lingering fear washing over her. She felt a soft wave of gratitude toward John, who had simply watched, intervened at the right moment, and restored a sense of safety without drama. She walked the rest of the way home more slowly now, her body still tense but her mind easing. Each step was careful, deliberate, as she reflected on what had just happened. It wasn't just about being threatened. It was about witnessing the difference one person could make when they chose to stand up for what was right. Lila realized that courage didn't always roar. It sometimes walked calmly alongside those in need, offering protection quietly but powerfully. By the time she reached her building, Lila felt a sense of empowerment. The fear she had felt earlier hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed. She felt more aware, more in control, and more appreciative of the people who could make a difference in moments of injustice. She remembered the way John had stood, the calmness in his eyes and the silent strength he carried. He hadn't sought attention or praise, he had simply acted, and that made all the difference. Inside her apartment, she rested on the couch, her hands lightly pressed against her belly. The baby moved gently and Lila smiled softly. She thought about the day, the fear, the tension, and the relief that followed. Life often threw unexpected challenges, she realized, but sometimes those challenges brought unexpected heroes into view. The encounter left her with a story she would remember forever, a story of courage, protection, and the reminder that human decency still existed even in ordinary streets. As evening approached, Lila prepared a small meal, her thoughts drifting back to the street, the biker, and the stranger who had quietly intervened. She felt a deep gratitude, not just for her safety, but for the reminder that ordinary moments could reveal extraordinary acts of humanity. The day had started as a simple walk, a routine errand, but it had turned into something far more significant, a lesson in courage, awareness, and the impact of standing up for someone in need. And as she settled in, feeling the gentle rhythm of the city outside her window, Lila made a silent promise to herself. She would carry that memory, that sense of hope and gratitude forward. She would remember that even in the face of fear, one person's courage could make all the difference, and most importantly, she would carry with her the belief that the world, though unpredictable, still had moments of kindness and protection waiting in unexpected places. The next day, Lila felt a strange mix of anxiety and determination as she left her apartment. She couldn't ignore the memory of the biker, and she knew the possibility of encountering him again was real. Her baby kicked softly as if sharing her unease, reminding her that she had to stay calm and careful. Lila's steps were slow and measured as she walked through her familiar streets, keeping an eye on her surroundings without letting fear dominate her movements. Not far from her apartment, she noticed the biker again. This time, he seemed more aggressive, more deliberate in his intimidation. He parked his motorcycle at an angle that blocked part of the sidewalk, leaning casually against it as if daring her to continue. Lila's chest tightened, but she didn't stop. She focused on steady breaths and reminded herself of the stranger who had helped her before. She felt a small flicker of courage, knowing she wasn't completely alone. The biker's eyes followed her every move. "You just can't stay away, huh?" he sneered, stepping closer. Lila instinctively placed her hands over her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements as a reminder of why she had to stay composed. "Please," she said, her voice firm but calm. "I don't want any trouble." Her words seemed to amuse him more than anything, and he chuckled darkly. From across the street, John appeared again, his calm, strong presence immediately drawing attention. Lila's heart lifted slightly. Seeing him there reminded her that someone was willing to intervene if things escalated. John didn't rush toward the biker or make any dramatic gestures. He simply stood tall and composed, exuding an authority that didn't need to be loud to be noticed. The biker noticed him too, and for a moment his confident smirk faltered. The tension in the air was thick. Passers-by stopped to watch, sensing the conflict without knowing the details. The biker, sensing the pressure, attempted to act braver than he felt. He revved his engine, a low growl that echoed down the street. Lila flinched but didn't move backward. She planted her feet firmly, determined not to show fear, focusing instead on maintaining control over herself. John took a step forward, his voice calm but clear. "Step back," he said, not as a threat but as an undeniable command. The biker paused, caught off guard by the steady tone and unwavering gaze. Lila felt a mixture of relief and hope. She knew the situation wasn't over yet, but the balance had shifted. The biker no longer had complete control, and John's presence was making that clear. The biker's frustration became more evident. He took a few steps closer, trying to reassert dominance. "Who do you think you are?" he demanded, his tone harsh but uncertain. John didn't respond with anger. He maintained his calm stance, his eyes fixed on the biker, silently signaling that further harassment would not be tolerated. Lila felt the strength in his restraint, understanding that real courage didn't need to be aggressive to be effective. The biker's smirk disappeared completely now, replaced by hesitation. He tried to regain control, shifting his weight and revving the engine again, but his movements lacked confidence. He realized that his usual tactics, mocking, intimidation, showing off, were not working this time. He was no longer the one in control. Lila felt a wave of relief but remained alert, aware that the confrontation wasn't fully over. John took another step forward, closing the subtle gap between him and the biker. His presence was commanding yet composed, a perfect balance that made it clear he wasn't there to escalate but to ensure safety. Lila felt her chest relax slightly, knowing she had a protector who could handle the situation without unnecessary force. The biker glanced around nervously, sensing the attention of the growing crowd of onlookers. Their eyes and whispers added to his unease, further weakening his facade of dominance. "Back off," John said again, his voice unwavering. This time, the words carried the weight of authority and consequence. The biker froze, uncertain how to respond. He looked at Lila, who stood quietly but firmly, and then back at John, realizing that the confrontation had shifted entirely. Lila felt the tension in her body ease just a little, recognizing that the situation was moving toward resolution. The biker's engine roared one last time, a final attempt to regain control, but it lacked conviction. He shifted on his bike, clearly weighing his options. Lila's heart pounded as she watched, aware that the final moments of the confrontation were unfolding. John remained steady, his gaze unwavering, silently telling the biker that his intimidation would no longer work. Finally, the biker muttered something under his breath and slowly turned his bike, revving it gently as he sped away. The sound of the engine faded, leaving a quiet street behind. Lila exhaled deeply, relief flooding through her body. Her knees felt weak, but she had made it through another moment of fear. She looked at John, who nodded slightly, a small gesture acknowledging her safety. Lila took slow steps forward, her body still tense, but her mind easing. She felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the stranger who had intervened, not with violence, not with aggression, but with calm authority and presence. She realized that courage could take many forms. Sometimes it was the quiet observer, the steady presence who could make all the difference. As she walked home, she reflected on the encounter. The biker's arrogance and aggression had been met with a composed, confident, and human approach. The contrast between the two men highlighted a simple truth. Real strength often comes from self-control, awareness, and the willingness to stand up for what is right without needing to dominate. Lila felt inspired by what she had witnessed. By the time she reached her apartment, Lila felt a sense of empowerment. The fear that had gripped her earlier had transformed into awareness, resilience, and gratitude. She entered her apartment and leaned against the door, catching her breath. She placed her hands on her belly and felt the baby move gently, as if acknowledging the end of danger. A soft smile spread across her face, and she realized that she had been part of a moment that was both frightening and profoundly human. She thought about the lesson she had learned, that even in moments of fear, courage and protection could appear in unexpected ways. John's intervention had not been about showing off or asserting power. It had been about ensuring safety, standing firm without escalating, and demonstrating the quiet but undeniable strength of human decency. Lila sat on her couch, reflecting on how different her walk might have been without his presence. The fear would have been overwhelming, and the biker's aggression might have escalated. But with the calm, steady intervention, she felt protected and reassured. She understood that courage doesn't always roar. It sometimes simply stands quietly in the right place at the right time. As evening approached, Lila prepared a simple dinner, her mind replaying the events of the day. She felt a mixture of relief, awe, and hope. The city, which often seemed ordinary, had shown her extraordinary acts of human decency. She realized that even in the midst of fear, ordinary people could step up and make a profound difference. The experience reinforced her belief in the value of courage, awareness, and empathy. She remembered John's calm eyes, his steady voice, and the way he had acted without hesitation. It wasn't just the act itself. but the manner in which he handled the confrontation that left the strongest impression. Lila understood that true courage is often quiet, deliberate, and focused on protecting others rather than seeking attention or recognition. As night fell, Lila reflected on the events of the past 2 days. Her walk, initially a routine errand, had turned into a life lesson about fear, courage, and human kindness. She felt grateful for the protection she had received, for the example of composure and bravery she had witnessed, and for the reminder that even in ordinary places, extraordinary things could happen. Lila whispered quietly to herself, a soft promise to carry the lesson forward. She would remember the encounter, not as a moment of fear alone, but as a story of hope, courage, and humanity. The biker's aggression had been met with calm, protective authority, showing her that even in difficult situations, there were people willing to step up and make a difference. She felt a sense of calm reassurance as the city outside her window grew quiet. The tension of the confrontation had faded, leaving her with a renewed sense of hope and faith in human decency. Lila knew that while fear and danger were part of life, so were courage, kindness, and protection, and she felt stronger for having witnessed both. By the time she settled into bed, Lila felt a deep sense of gratitude. The experience had taught her that courage isn't always loud, that protection doesn't always come with fanfare, and that ordinary people can have an extraordinary impact on the lives of others. She held her belly gently, feeling the baby move softly, and whispered a quiet thanks for the safety she had found, the lessons she had learned, and the reminder that even in moments of fear, humanity could shine brightly. The day after the confrontation, Lila felt a mixture of relief and lingering awareness as she walked outside. The streets felt familiar again, yet there was a new layer of consciousness in every step she took. She knew the biker was gone, that he hadn't returned, but the memory of the previous day's tension lingered. Her pregnancy made her feel more cautious, more aware of the need to protect herself and her baby, but it also gave her a sense of responsibility to stay composed and strong. Lila's walk was slow and deliberate, each step measured. She thought about the stranger who had intervened, John, and the quiet courage he had shown. He hadn't acted with aggression, hadn't made a scene or demanded attention. He had simply stood, watched, and acted at the right moment. That kind of courage, she realized, was rare and remarkable. It wasn't about force. It was about presence, awareness, and the willingness to protect someone in need. As she moved along the familiar streets, she noticed neighbors going about their daily lives, some stopping to smile or greet her. There was a subtle warmth in their gestures, a reminder that ordinary kindness existed alongside the challenges and dangers of city life. Lila felt a renewed sense of gratitude for the small acts of humanity around her. Even in moments of fear, people could show care, awareness, and empathy in ways that often went unnoticed. She paused at a small park nearby, resting on a bench as the sun cast a golden glow across the street. Her hands rested gently on her belly, feeling the baby move softly. Lila reflected on the events of the past few days, realizing that she had witnessed something extraordinary. It wasn't the biker's aggression that would stay with her. It was the calm, protective courage of someone who had stepped in without hesitation. The thought brought a smile to her face. Lila knew that John's actions had made a difference not only in her life, but in the moment itself. His presence had created a barrier between danger and safety, and it had allowed her to continue her day without harm. She felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not only for her own safety, but for the reminder that human decency still existed, even in unexpected places. Walking home later, Lila reflected on how fear and courage often existed side by side. The biker had represented fear, arrogance, and disregard for others, while John had represented courage, restraint, and protection. The contrast had been striking, and it had taught her a valuable lesson about the power of presence. Sometimes words weren't necessary. A calm, authoritative presence could speak volumes. She thought about how this experience might change her. She felt more aware of her surroundings, more confident in her ability to respond to challenges, and more appreciative of the people around her who could make a difference. Lila realized that courage didn't always need to be dramatic or loud. It could be quiet, steady, and yet profoundly impactful. As she entered her apartment, Lila felt a sense of calm. She placed her groceries down, sat on her couch, and looked out the window at the city below. Life continued as usual, with people going about their routines, the streets filled with everyday sounds. Yet for her, the ordinary had been transformed. She had experienced fear, confrontation, and resolution, all within the span of a few days, and it had left her with a deeper understanding of human strength and compassion. She thought about the lessons she could carry forward. First, the importance of staying calm and composed in the face of fear. Second, the power of quiet courage, the ability to protect without escalating, to intervene without aggression. And third, the reminder that ordinary people could have extraordinary impact in someone else's life, often without expecting recognition or praise. Lila spent the evening reflecting on these lessons, preparing a small meal while the city outside her window shifted into night. She felt a sense of peace knowing that the immediate danger was over, and that she had been supported by someone who acted with awareness and integrity. Her heart was still tender from the anxiety of the previous days, but it was now mixed with hope, gratitude, and inspiration. Later, as she rested on the couch, Lila thought about the future. She would carry her baby soon into a world that could be both challenging and beautiful. She hoped to teach them the lessons she had learned, the importance of awareness, compassion, and courage. She wanted them to understand that fear was a part of life, but it could be met with calm strength, kindness, and protection. In the days that followed, Lila noticed small changes in her perspective. She walked with more confidence, noticed her surroundings more carefully, and appreciated the ordinary acts of kindness she might have overlooked before. The memory of the biker faded slightly, replaced by the memory of John's calm, protective presence. She realized that these moments of courage were rare, but they existed, and they could restore faith in humanity even in ordinary, everyday life. Lila also thought about the bystanders, the people who had witnessed the confrontation from a distance. She hoped that seeing courage in action might inspire them as well, reminding them that stepping up, even in small ways, could have a meaningful impact. She understood that human kindness often rippled outward, influencing others in ways that weren't immediately visible. That night, as she prepared for bed, Lila felt the baby stir softly. She whispered a quiet thank you, a mix of gratitude for her own safety and hope for the future. The encounter had been frightening, yes, but it had also been enlightening. It had shown her that ordinary moments could reveal extraordinary courage and that humanity, even when it seemed distant, could shine through in unexpected ways. Lila drifted off to sleep with a sense of calm and reassurance. She knew that the streets outside might not always be safe, that danger could appear unexpectedly, but she also knew that courage, awareness, and human decency existed to counter it. The past days had taught her that fear and courage could coexist, but courage could prevail when it mattered most. The next morning, she woke with a renewed sense of strength. She prepared for her day with careful steps, but also with the confidence that she could handle challenges with grace and awareness. The lessons of the past few days stayed with her, lessons of courage, human decency, and the quiet power of presence. She understood now that life could be unpredictable, but that moments of courage and kindness could transform fear into hope. As she stepped outside, Lila felt a sense of gratitude for the ordinary streets she had once walked without thought. They had become a place where she had learned some of the most important lessons of her life. She felt empowered, knowing that she had faced fear and survived, supported by someone who had acted with integrity and care. The memory of the stranger's calm, protective presence gave her reassurance that even in a world full of unpredictability, courage and kindness could always be found. By the end of the day, Lila reflected on her journey. She had walked through fear, witnessed courage, and learned a lesson she would carry forever. Life could be challenging, and people could act in ways that were harmful or thoughtless. But there were also those who could stand up, protect, and inspire. She felt a sense of hope and faith in humanity that she hadn't known before. Lila knew that she would pass these lessons on to her child one day, about courage, awareness, and the importance of protecting others. She realized that even ordinary people could have extraordinary impacts and that the power of presence, calm, and compassion could change lives. The encounter with the biker and the quiet intervention had left her forever changed, filled with gratitude, hope, and a renewed understanding of human strength. As night fell and the city grew quiet, Lila rested, feeling her baby move gently. She smiled softly, Thinking about the past few days, the lessons she had learned, and the courage she had witnessed, she knew that life would continue to have its challenges, but she also knew that humanity, kindness, and courage could be found even in the most unexpected places. And as she drifted into sleep, Lila carried with her a sense of peace, gratitude, and hope. The story of fear, courage, and human decency had come to an end, but its lessons would stay with her forever. She had faced danger, witnessed protection, and learned the profound impact one person could have in ensuring the safety and dignity of another. The world, she realized, was full of moments like this, moments where ordinary actions could create extraordinary outcomes.